All right, now I'm on air. I just talked for like half an hour into my computer without starting the video. I mean, it's like a disease with me. So this is going to be round two, even though it's round one as far as you're concerned. So I'm starting a podcast, video blog cast thing where I talk and answer people's questions and whatever. In fact, I'm going to share this link right now. How do I share this? Yeah, all right, you'd think, of course Google makes it like impossible to share this link. I'm just going to paste this link into the browser. Whatever, it's not working. Anyway, so I was going through on Facebook and I was reading. I kind of solicited some questions, because I have to talk about this stuff. Like I find, politics, ideas. I mean, I hate politics, the actual act of politics and politicians, but the ideas behind it are fascinating. And so I can't not talk about it. And so I usually just talk to my wife about it. Talk at my wife would be a better explanation. But I'm going to talk to you guys because that's a lot more interesting to me. And so got a couple questions here. First one was about cultural appropriation, which I don't want to talk about. I don't know anything about that. I mean, as it pertains to the idea that you can own an idea, that some culture or some group of people can own an idea and somehow like either prevent other people from using it. That's sort of what I understand it to be. I think that's absurd. But I mean, if you're meaning in the sense that people are sort of taking the cultural heritage of someone and then using that to mock them, that sucks and is stupid, but again, I don't know anything about that, so I'm not going to talk about it. This is better, from Trevor Naveen. A common complaint of capitalism is that those without money get the short end of the stick. How does the absence of government change or improve that? That's a good question. I have to take issue with the word capitalism because capitalism has this connotation, like you hear the word capitalism and you think something that is almost certainly different than what someone else thinks when they hear capitalism. Like it's got all these embedded like emotions and history in your mind of, how your political views, it's sort of all embedded. Like when you hear that word, like if I hear the word socialism, like I'm automatically thinking XYZ thing, where it's the person who says the word socialism to me or the word capitalism might be meaning something else. So I'm going to heretofore stop using the word capitalism. And I'm going to talk about, I'm not even going to say free market. I'm going to say voluntary interaction, as in no one is basically aggressively forcing other people to do things or just making a list of rules that people have to follow. People are interacting voluntarily, right? So how does, if we didn't have government, again, that's also a word that I don't particularly like because there's so much embedded in there too. If I say, I don't support the government, or I don't think the government should be as powerful as it is, or I don't think we should have a government. You take that to mean like there should be no rules, that everyone should be able to do whatever they want, whenever they want, which isn't what I mean, because I think you can have governance without some state entity that has a monopoly on the use of force in a given territorial area, which is what a government or a state is. And actually, let's define that better. A state. When you hear the word government, what do you think? I mean, generally you think the people that make the rules, right? The courts, the police, the, whatever, that's like the government, the senators and stuff. Now, the state is basically the government, but the state has a monopoly on governance. Like if I tried to like draw a line around my house and say, okay, I'm the government here, I make the rule, I make the laws, right? And I'm going to like issue trade agreements with the US and the US government has nothing to say with what I'm doing over here. That can't fly, right? Because they're declaring me under their rule. I'm subordinate to them, right? And so I'm going to just use the word state because I think you can have conventions, rules that people follow without actually having some group that extracts money from everyone else with taxes that enforces everything. And I'll talk more about that, but just from a starting point, The general purpose of his question, which I'm going to read again, a common complaint of capitalism is that those without money get the short end of the stick. How does the absence of government change or improve that? And that's a great question, because there's, I think, a general, especially among people on the left-leaning, progressive, Democrat, whatever you want to say, there's this kind of general opinion that the government helps the poor, right? That the kind of the rich are exploiting the poor on a regular basis, and the government is the one who's stepping in and preventing the rich from exploiting the poor. I mean, personally, I think the government is exploiting the poor on a scale that is way more than the rich. I mean, the government, if you were to ask 10 people on the street, is our government kind of sort of well-run, honest, with integrity, or is it like basically corrupt? Almost to a person, I think they would say it is corrupt, right? It is a corrupt process. And what that means is that the people with a lot of power and a lot of money are the ones that basically control the government. They're the ones that donate to the campaigns. They're the ones that get the corporate subsidies. I mean, you see these memes going around on Facebook like, oh, you know, food stamps cost like $1 and corporate subsidies cost like $10 trillion or whatever it is, which I don't believe the numbers that they say. That's why I use ridiculous numbers. The point is that corporate handouts cost a lot of money, and they do. That is absolutely true. Whichever side is in power, their special interests are getting a ton of benefits, a ton of money from the state, from the government. And almost all of that is at the expense of the poor, right? Like the poor are disproportionately affected by the government's terrible laws. Drug laws, of course, come to mind. Like, when does a well-to-do, like, white upper-class person go to jail or go to prison for possessing drugs? I mean, I can't think of anyone. I mean, I'm sure it has happened, right? But they can afford a good lawyer. They can blah, blah, blah. The system is in their favor. And it just doesn't happen very often. It's the minorities, like lower socioeconomic status, the inability to fight the system in a certain way. They're getting pulled over, profiled, stopped and frisked way more often. They're the ones suffering from these terrible government laws way more than me, for example, right? And it's not only that. I mean, if you read about Ferguson, right? The Ferguson, Mike Brown, Black Lives Matter. I'm not going to get into that whole thing, but there's this deep-seated hatred of these local governments because they basically exist to extract money from the poor, right? You get a speeding ticket, and then you can't pay it, and then it doubles, and then you get this. And before long, I mean, they just make so much money off the poor that they don't make off the rich, because the rich, or the more well-off, you've got a driveway to park your car in so it's not getting broken into. You live in the neighborhood where you're not having to deal with a lot of this crap. And getting carried away here. I'm going to try to come back on track. The government does not work to the benefit of the poor. There's certain situations in which, like handouts, for example, like, I don't know, whatever it's called, welfare, the direct handouts to the poor. I don't think that, another like terrible policy that creates a class of people that are just dependent, that have to live off of that money, which is bad. I'm losing my train of thought here. It's the worst because I did this once already. I was so good last time. You got to trust me. It was perfect. That wasn't perfect. It was probably terrible, but it was the first time, and the second time through is always way worse. I'm trying to think what other ways the government just completely screws over the poor on the regular basis. The government's monetary policy, the fact that they control all the money, they can just print up money and hand it to their political cronies. I mean, rich people put their money into, they tax shelter it overseas, right? They invest in things. So like over the course of time, their money doesn't lose value, it gains value, right? And overwhelmingly, the poor can't do that, right? They don't have like an investment strategist person. Oops. Howdy.